Day one of free agency brought some expected departures from the Florida Panthers from their Stanley Cup final run. But who were the Panthers able to keep too? And with some of their pending UFAs still not signed, will the Florida Panthers be able to bring back Vladimir Tarasenko? We discuss that and more next on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast.
You're Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome into this Tuesday, July 2nd edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. I'm Armando Velez from the Hockey News. You can follow me on X at MondoMan12, follow show account on X and Instagram at @LO_FLA Panthers. And shout out to the everydayers who come back here and get your daily Florida Panthers fix. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. As the playoffs have finished, the sports stopped sporting like we want them to. But this summer, FanDuel is hooking you up, all customers, with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. So welcome in, guys, Florida Panthers fans, here to today's show. If you are watching on YouTube, we are doing this live. And to tell you guys what time it is 9:35 a.m. And why we are doing this live and why I'm telling you the time is because this is the time of year where a lot of stuff can be outdated and can age very poorly based on everything of the information that I will give to each of you guys, because things can happen at any moment. Just like recording yesterday's show, finding out that Sam Reinhart had signed an extension, but not knowing any of the clauses nor the AAV until after I recorded the show. So something that happened yesterday for yours truly. And that happens during free agency. That happens during the trade deadline. It's just, hey, this is just what we sign up for as fans and what I sign up for as a content creator here. But we do have the terms and the actual AAV for Sam Reinhart. So for Sam Reinhart, he will be making $8.625 million over the next 8 years starting this year, but average AAV with a base salary of $1 million each. So most of them are going to be coming via signing bonuses for Sam Reinhart. And the clauses is a no move clause through the first 6 years of the contract, and then a modified no trade clause in the last 2 years of the deal for Sam Reinhart and company. So with Barkov and Tkachuk having 6 years left on their deal, Forsling and Reinhart's contracts starting this coming year, and the clauses for both Forsling and Reinhart both starting at the end of the 2030 season, that matches up with Barkov and Tkachuk's, so that if the Panthers need to make anything drastic out after those two players' contract expire, Bill Zito or whoever may be the GM in the future for the Panthers, if Bill Zito doesn't retire or goes into a different role and promotes someone else. I mean, we saw Joe Sakic after he won the Stanley Cup with Colorado. He was the GM of that team in 2022, and then Chris McFarland took over as the general manager while Sakic is just doing the president of hockey ops, which that's Bill Zito's title. He has both titles for the Panthers. So don't be surprised for Bill Zito if he takes less of the actual transactions. I mean, Dale Talon did it when Tom Rowe came into the mix. So, and then Dale Talon was the general manager. He returned to his general manager duties for him after Tom Rowe left the organization after the 2016 season. So a lot of things down the line for the Panthers as far as now from 2025 to 2030, you still have a little bit of a window that you have to at least contend in the Eastern Conference, as the majority of the guys who are in their primes, they're in their late 20s. It's still a pretty, not the youngest of teams, but still good enough when it comes to age and the potential to make something happen and continue to be in contention. The Panthers are not going to be a lottery team. There might not be some years where may not be at the top of the division, but they're going to be a playoff contender for multiple years and knocking on the window for that. And so another transaction that happened for day one of free agency, Dmitry Kulikov, a 4-year 4 times 1.15 AAV deal. And this was one that I was not expecting for the Florida Panthers here, as Kulikov was a little older, the role that he played. But I like this for the Panthers for a few reasons. Number one, a guy in your franchise who you drafted back in 2009, left for a few years, came back, wanted to win a cup, but he was a guy that never wanted to leave in the first place for the Panthers, and now fulfilled his own personal promise of the Panthers getting to winning the Stanley Cup. And when you go through so much in your career, the ups and downs, and also for him maybe not living up to his draft stock for him, and getting that security in term for him, and taking him to his age 37 season too for Kulikov, it gives him an opportunity to retire as a Panther. And the thing is with Kulikov, there's also another opportunity for him too, is to mentor a young defenseman for the Florida Panthers coming up from Charlotte, and there might be times where Kulikov might be the 7th defenseman, or maybe he might not even finish the current contract that he has too. And the thing is, for that one, it's so the money involved, it's so easy to eat up for the Florida Panthers if they choose to go into a different direction for them too. So opportunities to eat the contract, and opportunities for them also to bring them into the front office and management and scouting too for them, because they've been so great with keeping alumni around. You think Patrick Hornquist, Sean Thornton for them, Roberto Luongo, Ed Jovanowski on the TV side, Randy Moeller too, Bill Lindsay. They've been Peter Worrell, who works with at War Memorial for them. So that's another thing for the Florida Panthers, of how they've been able to build this family type of organization, first class. I can't explain any more of how well they live up to that first class organization like they have, based on like who they keep around in their franchise, and not like alienating other guys. But let's go to the guys who did leave for the Florida Panthers, hitting the open market and honestly getting paid too. Congrats to all the guys who got paid. Brandon Montour, 7 years times $7 million AAV with the Seattle Kraken. Maybe a team in a little bit of a crossroads, or a little bit of purgatory after missing the playoffs in their inaugural season, making it, and then going back down to earth, maybe regressing to the mean, but then bringing an experienced guy, someone who won the Stanley Cup, someone who's going to run the power play, maybe even on their first pair too. So an opportunity for him. Also, Brandon Montour has a young family. Kai Wade Montour was born during the Stanley Cup final last year between games 1 and 2. He had to fly from Vegas to Florida and back and play a Stanley Cup final game too. That's not easy. And he has one on the way too. So congratulations to him and his family. Oliver Ekman-Larsson, a 4-year deal times 3.5 AAV with the Toronto Maple Leafs. They're trying to shore up that defense for the Toronto Maple Leafs there, as they're trying to, the little bit of resources that they have, they're bringing in a guy on the cheap, Stanley Cup champion too, for Oliver Ekman-Larsson. After being bought out by the Vancouver Canucks, he definitely has earned his term there for him too. Anthony Stolarz, probably the best backup in the National Hockey League all of last season. Him and Laurent Brossoit were two guys who were some of the best backups, so working behind some workhorses in Connor Hellebuck and Sergei Bobrovsky. Him 2 years, 2.5 million AAV with the Toronto Maple Leafs too. So him and Joseph Wall, two goalies, pretty who are making less than $6 million together on their books. The asset management that Brad Treliving has to do when you're paying 4 guys over $10 million. Hey, you got a reliable backup there in the hottest hockey market in the NHL. Hey, good for him that Anthony Stolarz is getting his bag and term too. Kevin Stenlund, this is the one that hurts the most probably for me, because this, again, wanted him extended. Big on the PK, takes the key faceoffs when the Panthers needed him to them the most to get some clears, and he gets a 2-year, $2 million AAV with the Utah Hockey Club. And for Utah, them bringing Sergachev and then John Marino, that's gonna be a team that's gonna be in the mix very, very soon, as now management is able to spend because they have ownership that wants them to spend too. So that's another thing for bringing guys. It's going to look like a whole different organization with still the same player, a good portion of the same players from the Arizona Coyotes. So once again, I feel for the Arizona Coyotes fans. And also Ryan Lomberg, the Lamborghini. he's getting hit. He's going back to Calgary. He's going back to his roots where it all started for him in the NHL. And for him going back to that, and when you win a cup, and also the Calgary Flames, let's be honest, after trading Jacob Markstrom, all the guys that they did in the past few years, with losing Johnny Gaudreau, Matthew Tkachuk, Tyler Toffoli recently, they are now no longer in a retool. They're basically rebuilding there in Calgary. But for Lomberg, getting a little bit of term and mentoring some young guys, Igor Sharangovich got an extension for the Calgary Flames too. So that's a building block that they see on their franchise of guys who they maybe want to build around in the future, because you still have Jonathan Huberdeau, Nazem Kadri on their books too for them. And also, one mistake that I did make yesterday was that even though the qualifying offers for RFAs were due at 5 p.m., the cap sites did not have that updated the morning after. So I took it for what it was and read it by accident. So Josh Mahura, he was not qualified, given a qualifying offer by the Florida Panthers. So he is a free agent. So nothing of note there for Josh Mahura for the Florida Panthers as far as him being retained. So it looks like he has hit the open market for the Cats. But we are going to transition to segment number 2, where we're going to discuss more about opening night for the Florida Panthers. When is it going to be? We're also who did the Florida Panthers replace the guys who departed the Panthers? We are going to discuss that more next here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. And I love sports. I love them so much, and I never want them to stop. But with the playoffs ending, we get fewer games, and the sports aren't sporting like I want them to. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone, every day, all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com/lockedon and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Welcome back here to this Tuesday, July 2nd edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. And are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Have to turn down the volume with all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you the can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. So who did the Florida Panthers replace as far as the guys who departed the franchise for free agency, which once again, this was expected for the Panthers, as now the bill has come due for the Panthers. And this is a crazy transition period for the Panthers, with still a lot of guys on your book, with Ekblad's contract coming off the books after this season, and then Sergei Bobrovsky's contract coming off the books in the next 2 years. But still, for Bob, you're keeping him around. He just won you a Stanley Cup, and also he if it weren't for Connor McDavid being in the Gretzky territory as far as playoff performance, he would have been your Conn Smythe winner, at least in my opinion, and a lot of other people's opinions too. So this is a period of time where you're gonna have to identify depth pieces right before a lot of the chains, the cap chains, are released from Bill Zito too. And also think about this for the Panthers as far as committed to players. I mean, when you think about Tkachuk, Barkov, Forsling, and now Reinhart, those guys make up 38% of the cap for them. And if the cap is expected to go up to 93 next year, it'll go down by 2%. So think about year by year for those deals, as those are going to be just going down slowly but surely for them, as now with TNT getting a good majority of the games now, with the still negotiations that still have to happen with the NBA. This is an opportunity for a lot of games to be on Turner Sports too. So that's another thing to consider that could really help the NHL really get their exposure if they're the only sport on that network. But opening night for the Florida Panthers, it has been announced that on October 8th, the Florida Panthers will open the season against the Boston Bruins as part of a triple header between Boston, Florida, the Chicago Blackhawks against the Utah Hockey Club, and then the St. Louis Blues visiting the Seattle Kraken. I'm going to assume that opening night for them, based on the time zones of who's home, that it'll be a 5:30 puck drop, and then Utah versus Chicago will be 8 p.m. They're going to feature Connor Bedard again, which Connor Bedard got a lot of help during free agency, bringing guys like Tyler Bertuzzi into the mix, Teuvo Teravainen there too. So Bedard got a lot of help too. And then the Blues and the Seattle Kraken will be part of that. And the schedule comes out today. So that's another thing. We won't see the national TV schedule, but we'll see some of the slots that could indicate whether the Florida Panthers will have a nationally televised game. But with the guys who the Panthers replaced, that's what we are here for, talking about who the Panthers used to replace the guys who left. And this is the time of year where you have to maybe get some bargains here in free agency, where a lot of players who deservedly, and I say that again, deservedly got paid to go elsewhere. And I know it hurts because we get emotionally attached to these guys, and after they win a championship, it's so quick on them leaving. It's like, but they were just here. Yes, they were. But hey, we could embrace them forever. There's going to be anniversary games, 5, 10, 15. So they'll always remain a part of us, and they'll always remain a part of this region for the rest of our lives, as long as we live. But one of the players who Bill Zito decided to sign as far as free agency, Thomas Nosek. He was with the New Jersey Devils recently, a 1-year, $775K contract, and this is your Kevin Stenlund replacement. A good amount of minutes on the PK, plays over 12 minutes a night, over 50% on draws, valuable for clears, and even though he's on his fifth team, he's maybe had a little bit of trouble staying healthy. But still reliable guy that you want on your bottom six, and he has 52 games of playoff experience between the Vegas Golden Knights and the Boston Bruins. So that's another thing for experience coming in, and guys who want to be part of a championship winning team too. So you sacrifice a little bit of dough in order to be part of something bigger than yourself. So that's another mindset that these players need to have when coming over to the destination franchise that is the Florida Panthers, because they lived up to it from the Everglades to the beaches. But another one, 25-year-old Jesper Boqvist. We saw him in Boston as far as with the Boston Bruins. I mean, one of the games that he had, I believe it was that April 6th matinee, that he had that game-winning goal against the Florida Panthers after a turnover, and then he led on a breakaway for them to score. 5-on-5 this season, though, plus 11, too. 20 goals for, 9 against, 11 over 11 minutes of average time on ice. Big, physical, not a lot of special teams for him, but he could get a chance this year too with the Panthers. So the big body guys, which is the identity that the Panthers want to play when it comes to winning your board battles, and even whenever it's in your own zone or even in the neutral zone for them. Another one, AJ Greer, who played recently with the Calgary Flames. But the coolest thing about this one is Greer, he posted on his Instagram story of him, young AJ Greer and Roberto Luongo, which Greer happens to be from Quebec too. So Roberto Luongo being from Quebec, him being from Quebec, he was maybe a childhood hero for him. So maybe that was an influence on him playing with the Florida Panthers. But analytics don't look the best based on situation with Calgary. But let's not forget, Sam Bennett's analytics didn't look great. Brandon Montour's analytics didn't look great before being traded here. So there's maybe not to judge that so quickly and see what it comes down to. And there's another one that I did not see coming, but it's a conversation worth having. Chris Driedger, do you remember him? The guy who got paid after 2021, right before the Seattle Kraken were coming into the mix. He left the Florida Panthers for 3 years there. The struggle with injuries, tore his ACL early in his tenure there with the Seattle Kraken, was placed on waivers, played in the AHL with Coachella Valley, and he actually brought them to the Calder Cup final, where unfortunately the Coachella Valley Firebirds did lose in the Calder Cup final against the back-to-back champions in the Hershey Bears. So that's another thing of his own redemption story. If you really think about it, Chris Driedger is trying for his own redemption story. He got paid. The Florida Panthers got him paid, and the Florida Panthers have gotten multiple guys paid. I mean, I just listed all the ones in segment 1, and even the ones recently, in even as recently as guys like Radko Gudas too. So he got paid. Anthony Duclair, he just signed a 4-year deal with the New York Islanders. Part of his success with the Florida Panthers, even though they traded him this past offseason, he got his own bag with a 4-year deal. I believe his cap at Duclair, if I had to do it on the top of my head, I believe it was 3.5 AAV with the New York Islanders. So that's another guy that the Florida Panthers are able to get paid. And hey, it's a cap world for the NHL, so you just can't keep everyone for them. And I even said yesterday, based on the Panthers' draft and who they want to extend, maybe Sam Bennett is the odd one out come next season for the Panthers, as maybe Anton Lundell is there to graduate. But let's go back to Chris Driedger and the situation that is with the goaltending. It's great competition for Spencer Knight going into training camp. And also, David Pragnota of the Fourth Period said that the Florida Panthers are not shopping Spencer Knight as of right now, but they have received phone calls on them. And let's also discuss more about the waiver rules that currently is going on with Spencer Knight. So at the time of Spencer Knight signing his contract, it was actually a few days before his 20th birthday. So that changes kind of the waiver rules for Spencer too. So it's either one of two things that have to happen in order for him to no longer be waivers exempt. Number one, has to be a whole season completed, whether it's NHL or AHL. That contract has to go through past the 2024-25 season. So no matter what happens, even if he's buried in the AHL all season, he will no longer be waivers exempt come next year, or playing a total of 21 games this season for the Panthers. And he has to play 80 based on when he signed his contract. So right now he has 59 total games played. And those include games that he would go in case the starting goaltender gets chased. So that's another thing for the young goaltender. But the Panthers, I don't think they're going to run away from giving him starts, because that's an inevitability anyway of his contract and the terms changing for him not being waivers exempt neither. So that's also one thing I want to bring up to you guys, that even if he doesn't win the backup job at the start of camp, you're thinking maybe you want a little bit of continuity with Chris Driedger there. But I think also if you put Chris Driedger on waivers, that it's going to be, I don't think that teams are going to be in a rush to claim him like they would have a few years ago too. So I think it's a good win-win situation that you're bringing kind of the band back together. At first, it was a little awkward when I saw that too, but I also got to think that a lot of things have changed with them getting older, a different coaching staff that Chris Driedger is coming back to. So that's one thing that I got to consider, because Zito makes the moves, but Paul Maurice makes the lineup too. So we got to remember that for this era of Florida Panthers hockey when it comes to the goaltending too. So, and if we learned anything, even though the tandem of Stolarz and Bobrovsky stayed healthy all season, it's not a guarantee to come next season with the tandem. So you got to have the third goaltender. We saw 2 years ago with Alex Lyon how important it is to have that third goaltender. But we're going to transition over to segment number 3, where we're going to discuss more about a former Panthers head coach who is in the news. So something we need to talk about then, and also go back to free agency, and also who are the players still available to sign it. The Florida Panthers still have a chance to re-sign them. We'll discuss that next here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Segment number 3 here on this Tuesday, July 2nd edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day here on a Tuesday. And this is not easy to talk about, what I'm about to discuss. And if you have been a fan of the Florida Panthers even before 2021, there is news about a former coach in the Panthers, and that is Joel Quenneville. And it has been Joel Quenneville Stan Bowman, and Al McIssac have been reinstated by the NHL to seek employment. And I do want to give a trigger warning to everybody listening out there. If you want to skip this part of the podcast, I will respect it. But then when I said on the podcast that I'm aware of the conversation between Joel Quenneville and Andy Strickland of the Cam and Strick podcast, I said there's nothing to discuss on the podcast unless they're reinstated. Well, now we're here. So I can't. It's something that can't be avoided. So, and the thing is for this is a little uneasy for, and there's not a lot. And Bill Zito was even asked about and spoke about how it's a very delicate situation for everything that's gone on. And even then, I said if the NHL really cared about everything that happened between Quenneville, McIsaac, Stan Bowman, Bradley Aldrich, and Kyle Beach, everything that happened in 2010, then they should ask Kyle Beach if it's okay for him to seek employment. But I was sent another video from the Cam and Strick podcast saying that Kyle Beach actually said that he didn't want to hurt Joel Quenneville's chances of getting employment. And the thing is with that, I don't hear it from the from the actual horse's mouth too. And that is something that I want to hear personally for that too. And also the fact that Aldrich got employment somewhere after he left the Chicago Blackhawks. And I want to think about that person too. And this is also for me the victims that I want to think about too. And the other one, not just Kyle Beach, but the fact that behavior was enabled in a different area too, even though Quenneville was not heavily involved. And I'll never forget that night in October or November. It was 7 games in where Quenneville didn't speak to the media after. The PR department held him out of speaking, and then the very next day going to the office, and then Cameron Strick talking to him later, a few years later, and just questions that he didn't feel comfortable, didn't reveal whether he was still getting paid by the Panthers too, as part of the resignation. So that's something to just wonder, and things we'll never have answers to for them. And hopefully that everyone involved in this have their own sense of healing, and the fact that it's not my place to say whether or not he should have a position in the NHL, but I will say that it does make me a little uneasy. And this is something that you just can't put a timeline to, because there's always going to be criticism anywhere it comes, whether it's 3 years, 5 years, 20 years from now for him. And it's just, and or whether he doesn't have any employment at all. It's just when that name, those 3 names get brought up, it'll be very uneasy for a lot of people. And also for me, during the 9-2 win for the Florida Panthers against the Tampa Bay Lightning back in February, I think it was, I was sitting a few seats from Stan Bowman. I'm just like thinking, wow, I'm literally close by to someone who's involved in one of the biggest scandals in NHL history too. So that was another thing that I felt a little bit uneasy myself too. But that's my 2 cents on the whole situation. As once again, this is very, very delicate, and like as promised, if they were reinstated, this is something that I wanted to talk about too for this. But now let's switch gears to back to the free agency here. And Nick Cousins, Vladimir Tarasenko are 2 guys left on sign. Steven Lawrence, as of right now, rechecking my Twitter as we go, because once again, this is live and things could age very poorly from here. And right now, Bill Zito has $7.3 million to play. And here's the thing with Tarasenko, he's 32, still pretty young in the NHL, and still able to play maybe like 4 or 5 years in the league. And he's not looking for something cheap like a $3 million deal. He's probably looking for something maybe 4.55 around there. And that's what he made on his last deal with the Ottawa Senators. Obviously, with us being on the other side of COVID-19 and the escrow that it's being paid, that the players are paying out, it seems very unlikely that the Panthers will be giving Vladimir Tarasenko an offer. And honestly, for me, he has residence in Weston. He had that residence there even before he was traded to the Florida Panthers. So will Vladimir Tarasenko take a little bit of a discount for him in order to still, and he has a young family for him too. So a place that he knows very well, a place that's like 10, 15 minutes from the arena too. Is he willing to sacrifice that, or does he want more financial security and knowing that he'll be back in Weston after his time with another team too? Because obviously a lot of the Russian players go to South Florida to train. Not only Vladimir Tarasenko, but Evgeny Malkin is one of them too for the Panthers. Nick Cousins, still unsigned. Steven Lawrence also unsigned too. But also for the Florida Panthers, they have 7.3 left, and they still have to sign Anton Lundell. And honestly, Panthers can take their time with Lundell. They took their time when Sam Reinhart when he was an RFA too, and they didn't really sign him until like July, September, August, something like that. I don't remember the exact date, but it took a little while for the Florida Panthers to get Reinhart under contract too, and there was no offer sheet there. A lot of NHL GMs are reluctant to use offer sheets too. I mean, we saw recently with Sebastian Aho and Jesperi Kotkaniemi for between Montreal and Carolina, of how there was a little bit of a war there too, and you don't want to put yourself in bad standing with another NHL GM, because that could prevent possible future trades that you're looking at. But going back to the Florida Panthers and just looking at daily faceoff, everyone is bumped up one. So don't take these lines with a grain of salt when you listen to when you hear them. So right now it's Barkov, Verhaeghe, Reinhart, Tkachuk, Bennett, Erod, Luosterainen, Lundell, Mackie Samoskevich, Rasmus Asplund, Jesper Boquist, and Thomas Nosek, while the D pairs are Forsling Ekblad, Kulikov Mikkola, and Bjornfoot Belinskis. Again, take these with a grain of salt when you hear them, me say them out loud too. So with that, Panthers are likely not done for them. There's still a few key free agents out there. There's the Tyler Johnsons of the world, 33 years old, who had 31 points in 67 games. Will he want to sign on the cheap for the Panthers? There's another one, Jack Roslovic, who had 31 points in 59 regular season games last year. James Van Riemsdyk, he's a little bit on the older side, 35 years old, who will fill out that bottom the bottom six for the Panthers. That'll be a 35 plus contract too on the Panthers' books. So do the Panthers want another 35 plus contract on their cap too? So that's another thing that they need to consider. But for the Panthers, we spoke about Kulikov mentoring. He's going to probably be mentoring a guy like Belinskis. And again, here's pros and cons of trading Ekblad's contract. You get cap relief, but how much of it is it worth putting a little bit of thinning your blue line too? That's another thing that I wonder when it comes to trading Aaron Ekblad, as someone who doesn't have the offensive numbers, but you've seen at times how he's been able to shut down guys when called upon. Yeah, the breakaways are annoying sometimes, and the irresponsible pinches for him too. But we've seen when the opposition does not bring it up in transition on a breakaway or odd man rush, how Ekblad is able to still hold his position, win board battles, and still get the puck out, even if he's not the fastest skater. So that's another thing to consider for that. But free agency brought over, here's a stat that I wanted to bring. Free agency brought us a spending of over $1 billion in total contracts for the NHL. And for the Panthers, and we knew that they weren't going to be big game hunting then. That's something that when you have so many expiring deals and the average amount that you're going to give is maybe around like $2 million for each guy, that was expected for the Panthers. But you saw big game hunting from the Nashville Predators going after Steven Stamkos, Jonathan Marchessault, Brady Shea too. You see the Buffalo Sabres trying to get something out of their defense with Victor Arvidsson from the LA Kings, even though he's had his fair share of injuries. Washington Capitals, they were known as a defensive team, but they added more to their brew line in Jacob Chikrin and Matt Roy too. Even brought South Florida native Brandon Duhaime into the mix. Elias Lindholm to the Boston Bruins, that was rumored even last year too, as we spoke all along about how the Florida Panthers beat the Boston Bruins, and it was through the middle of the ice, and that is some reinforcement there. I do think they paid a little too much for Nikita Zadorov as a guy who really exploded in a contract here and really did well in the playoffs with the Vancouver Canucks. But the back end of that deal is going to look not so pretty for them. And this is one that I kind of wanted, but knew that it was going to be maybe a little pricey and out of the Panthers' price range for them. Shane Gostisbehere, South Florida native, and a guy who could power play, who could quarterback a power play, for them, for possibly for the Panthers, and maybe competition between him and Gus Forsling, but looks like it's not going to happen with Shane Gostisbehere returning to the Carolina Hurricanes. So as of right now, I think Gustav Forsling is still your power play quarterback. The Detroit Red Wings, it's strange because they signed Jack Campbell, who was bought out by the Edmonton Oilers, Cam Talbot. Well, they already have Alex Lyon and Ville Husso. You know what they say? If you have 4 goaltenders, do you really have any? 2. And also, the Seattle Kraken bring in Chandler Stevenson on a 7-year deal, leaving the Vegas Golden Knights to the other expansion rival for them. Gets a little bit of security, good for their bottom 6, and gets a little bit of term for them. But we saw how much other teams have spent while they were on the verge of big game hunting and had to preserve a little bit during this flat cap era of the NHL. But for when you are up against the cap, and even Zito said that they're going to spend. So if you see that Lundell is maybe like 3.5-4 million around there, somewhere in that range, then in actuality, you really only have 3 to spend. So this is a position that the Panthers do find themselves in for this coming into next season. And hey, maybe they'd find another diamond in the rough for them to hopefully blossom and just like Gustav Forsling. But it's hard to find, and you can't guarantee. And also for me, I'm also not trying to put the pressure on other guys too. But hey, when you are part of a Stanley Cup championship organization, as a player, you want to do more to impress other guys. So that's possibly the motivation going into training camp this coming season. But that's going to do it for this edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Thank you once again for listening and watching here on YouTube, live on YouTube, as right now it's 10:11 a.m. on a Tuesday. So to timestamp when this is going and everything that could be outdated by the time this is posted on audio and everything. But thank you guys once again for listening. Come back tomorrow as we will be bringing in Jacob Winans for tomorrow's edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast to discuss if any other moves for the Florida Panthers happen in day 2 of free agency. We'll be here to discuss more of that then. But in the meantime, if you like what you're hearing, please subscribe to the podcast to be notified every single time the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast jumps into your podcast feed. Don't forget to also subscribe to the other shows on the Locked On NHL network, including Locked On NHL, Locked On Fantasy Hockey, Flip Livingstone, and Stu Roden, and Locked On NHL Prospects. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. So I'm Armando Velez, signing off. And you've been listening to Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day.